All right, we are now streaming as well, so I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
All right, thanks so much. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Welcome to Lunch and Learn, all about switches. We're going to have some fun looking at different things related to switches. So we're glad you joined us today. All right. So my name is Elizabeth Berry, and I'm an assistive technology specialist in the Simon Technology Center at Pacer Center. And I am joined by Kayla Dvorak, who is also an AT specialist in the Simon Technology Center. And if you would like to get a hold of us today to ask questions, things like that, our contact information is here on the screen. Feel free to send us an email. We're always happy to chat and talk about assistive technology. So, all right. So we have two handouts for today, and you can access those in a few different ways. Paul Sant, who is our director of the Simon Technology Center, who you saw at the beginning there, is monitoring our chat window today. So he will put the links to the PowerPoint as well as the supplemental handout in the chat for you. You can also use the QR code on the screen with your camera on your smartphone or a tablet to open it up that way. Or you can use those links there on the screen as well. And these handout links were also in the reminder email that you got for this workshop. They're usually at the very bottom of that email because that's where Zoom lets us put them, but they're there as well if you're looking for something you can just click on. And so the handouts are these PowerPoint slides that we're going through now, as well as a supplemental handout that has links to all of the switches and the interfaces that we're going to share with you today and do some demonstrations, as well as some other resources that might be helpful for you as you start or continue exploring things related to switches. So that's what those handouts are. All right, and just a few other tips before we get started. We are presenting here in Zoom webinar, and as Paul mentioned, we're also streaming to YouTube, our YouTube channel. So this will be archived on our YouTube channel after today if you want to watch it again. And Paul will share in the chat the handouts, as I mentioned, as well as the link to the workshop evaluation as we get closer to the end of the workshop. But please post in the chat as well if you're having technical difficulties, and Paul can help you with that. If you have comments or if you have questions for us, please put them in the chat. We're always happy to discuss questions and comments, and Paul will either answer or he will break in and ask us, and we will answer them live. And then a note about our certificate of attendance, that is available if you're attending with us live here on Zoom, or if you're watching on YouTube live. You must submit our workshop evaluation at the end of our time together today to get that certificate. And we're only able to provide certificates of attendance for people who view our workshops live. So if you're viewing this after February 16th, unfortunately, we're not able to provide a certificate of attendance. All right, and then for those of you who are not familiar with Pacer, Pacer is a nonprofit organization located in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And we've been around since about the 70s, and we were originally founded on the idea of parents helping parents and being a parent advocacy organization. But we currently have grown to have over 30 different programs for children and adults with disabilities, as well as their families and the professionals who work with them. So those programs range from children's mental health, the National Bullying Prevention Center. We have an early childhood program, as well as the Simon Technology Center, where Kayla, Paul, and I work. And at the end of today, we'll go a little bit more into kind of what services we have available in the Simon Technology Center in case you're interested in learning more after today, what other services we have available to you. All right. So as we dive in today, we're going to start with just a little background on what is a switch? Why would we want to use one? What are the characteristics of different switches and things like that? And then we'll do some demonstrations of things that are adapted to work with a switch. So you can just plug the switch in and go. And then we'll dive into what is an interface and why might we use an interface with a switch. And then Kayla will do some demos for us with switches and interfaces so that we can use things that might not be switch adapted already so that we can use them with a switch. And then we'll end with some kind of thoughts and questions to think about when you're picking a switch for an individual. So how do you decide which one to use? And then at the end, we'll do that workshop evaluation and have some time for questions, but please feel free to put those questions in the chat throughout. You don't need to wait for the end for that. All right. So that first question, what is a switch? So a switch is a tool that you can use to make or break the connections in an electrical circuit. So it provides that interface between a person and that technology that they want to control. So instead of performing actions such as manipulating a toy or turning on the light switch with your hands or using touch access on a tablet, then we instead will be using switches to have an alternative access method to manipulating that toy or turning on the light or accessing the tablet. And why is a switch important? Why are we talking about this today? Because for some individuals, switches can be very valuable and very important. They can provide access to toys, games, tablets, and other tools that someone might not be able to access, independently with their hands and touching things like that. So they can be more independent. They can participate in gaming, play, school, learning, things like that. They can participate in recreation and have fun. They can use it to communicate. You can plug a switch into a communication device, and you can use that to share your wants and ideas if you might not be able to verbally. And there can also be used for mobility, because you can use one with a wheelchair, and then you can use that switch to make the wheelchair go and drive that wheelchair. So they can be very valuable for an individual who might not be able to access and manipulate things with their fingers and those fine motor skills. All right, so as we kind of have already alluded to a little bit, what are some common uses of a switch? They can provide access to switch accessible toys. So this yellow jumping duck picture here is an example of one of those. It's a little hard to tell, but he has a little switch jack coming out of his back there, and this red button jelly bean switch is plugged in, so then I can push the switch and play with the toy that way. They can also provide access to communication devices. So this individual in the picture here on the bottom, he's reaching out to touch his switch, and it's a little hard to see what's on the screen, but he has the color page of his communication system up, and he's doing an art project at one of our previous events. So he is going through there to pick and let someone know what color of paint or marker, whatever the activity was that he wants. So he's able to use that switch to get what he wants known. You can also use it to access computers, tablets, appliances. We're going to look at a few of those today, as well as I mentioned power wheelchairs as well. All right, so when we think of the main switch categories, there are lots of different switches, but we can kind of put them into roughly two main categories. The first one are mechanical switches, and these are the most commonly used switches. Probably what, if you were to think about switches, a lot of what you would think about are those mechanical switches. And these are switches that require some sort of force from the individual to activate. So they have a surface that you have to physically touch, press and release to activate. You don't necessarily have to use your hands. You can use any body part. You can use your head, a fist, elbow, your feet, but they do require some kind of contact to activate. And generally, these are kind of your more durable switches. Then the second category of switches, which are electrical switches. And these are your switches that don't require force to activate. And so these might be helpful for someone who has limited strength to activate a switch, and they can be activated in a variety of ways. So that big candy corn switch pictures there is a proximity switch, and I have the little candy corn switch here. It's the same, it's just smaller. But these are switches that I just have to get close to activate. I don't necessarily have to come in contact with the switch. And we'll look at another example of a proximity switch when we do our demonstrations and talk more about that. There are also fiber optics switches, infrared switches, where if I break kind of the light beam, something will activate. There are also sensor switches where you can use a muscle twitch or your brain waves to activate and things like that. And generally, these can be less durable than those mechanical switches, but not always. So just kind of keep kind of those different switch categories in mind. We're going to demonstrate, I think a lot of the ones we'll do today are mechanical, but we do have a few electrical ones that we're going to be showing as well. All right. And as we get kind of dive into our demos here, this will definitely become apparent. But there's also a variety of switches that have many different characteristics. So they can vary in size. So we will look at the jelly bean here in just a second. But this switch, it can come in many different sizes, bigger, smaller, and different shapes and things like that. So it really varies on what the individual needs. Switches come in different colors. If someone has a visual issue where they see a certain color better than others, that might be something that you want to think about. Some switches have different textures, so that if feeling that texture is alerting to someone and it's helpful for the switch to have a little bit of a texture, there are switches out there with that. We talked a little bit about the activation method. So do I have to hit the switch for it to go off, or do I just have to get close or break a beam of light? There are different options that way. And there are also different options for how much input I have to activate. So a lot of the switches today can have different amounts of input that are needed. Some you have to press pretty firmly, but there are some that just require kind of a light touch. And then there are some, as we talked about, you just have to get close. So there are, that is something to think about. And one of the questions that we'll talk about when how to pick a switch is thinking about what can the person who's going to use the switch, how much input can they reliably and comfortably use on a fairly regular basis. And that might help you think about which one to choose. And then as we'll look at as well, different switches have different amounts of feedback. So some of them will click to let you know they've activated, some will vibrate, some have lights. So that is also something that you can think about when you're deciding what kind of switches you want to try. All right, so now we're going to dive into our demos, which I always think is the best part of the day. And one thing that we do want to notice is that we're going to demonstrate a variety of switches and a variety of ways that you can use switches to activate things. And we've paired certain switches with certain toys or tablets and things like that, just for the purposes of demonstration. But we want to make sure that it's clear that you don't necessarily, that these, like this jelly bean on the screen, can be used with more than just switch adapted toys or recreation things. So, and the switches could be used with any of the items we're going to demonstrate. So just wanted to make that clear. All right. So I'm going to switch over to my dot cam so we can start looking at some switches here. Let's see. All right. So we're going to look at my dinosaur here in a moment, but what I want to start with is, let's see here, this jelly bean switch. So the jelly bean switch is kind of a circular switch that I hold it in my hand here. You can kind of get a sense of the size of it. But this is a switch that, if I turn it so you can kind of see me activate it here, it clicks when I activate it. That might be hard to hit through Zoom, but I have to press down the green part to get it to activate. And it also comes with different color tops. So it comes with red, yellow, blue, and green. So you could use that to use a color that an individual might see better than others. If you're using more than one, that can be helpful to have them be different colors so you know that which one activates what and things like that. But what I'm going to use this jelly bean switch for is I'm going to take the end of the switch plug here and plug it into my dinosaur toy. And I think this might work better if I hold up the dinosaur so you can see him. But as I hit my switch, he activates. And for him, if I hit the switch again, he stops. So with switch adapted toys, and kind of with anything that's switch adapted, there are a few different ways they can work. So this dinosaur works with kind of what they call latch switch activation. So I hit the switch once, he starts, and then to make him stop, I have to hit it again. But some switch toys will work that if I hit the switch, the dinosaur or the toy will keep going as long as I have the switch engaged, but then when I let go, it will stop. And some toys will activate for a certain length of time, and they'll keep going for that amount of time, even if I hit the switch to try and get them to stop. And so there's not, it's kind of how they've been adapted. In our library, we do label kind of what switch activation it is. But that's just something to keep in mind if you're looking for kind of a recreation activity, to think about what you're trying to do and what kind of switch method you might want to look for. So that is my dinosaur with the jelly bean. So I'm going to turn him off so he doesn't actually keep going here. But then I can also use another switch called the Pal Pad. And let's see if I can turn this way. You can kind of see it's a very flat membrane switch compared to the jelly bean. So in the jelly bean, I kind of have to go up a little bit to activate it, whereas this one could be right on the table and I don't have to go up very far to activate it. And this switch comes in 3 different sizes. So this is the middle size. So this, for my hand for reference here, there's a size bigger, and then there's a size smaller, which is about half of this size. But the way that this switch works, I'm going to show you with a different type of switch adapted toy here. This is my my garbage truck, my dump truck here. But what this truck has, I'm getting all tangled up here, is a remote control that has been switch adapted. So one of these ports will, let's see, though it's a little hard to see, but there's an arrow going up here, will make the car drive forward. And this one has kind of a circular arrow. That switch port will make the car kind of go in a circle. So I'm going to plug my switch in to my port. And one thing that I often forget, I also need to turn on my toy here. But then if I hit my switch might be in the way of my car here. I just barely need to tap it, and the car starts to go in a circle here. Oh, and I almost drove him off the table there. I was worried that. But so this is an example of a force that takes a little less pressure, a little switch that takes a little less force and pressure than that jelly bean to activate. I just need to lightly tap it. Oh, come on, there we go. To activate. So it could be an option for someone who might not have as much ability to use as much force, or if they want an option where I don't have to lift my hand up as high to activate that switch. All right. So there are lots of other things that you can do with switches in recreation. So there's the alternate spinner where you can use it kind of as a dice roll. But there's also an switch adapted dice roller, which Kayla, I think, has. And And so that can be, you can just press the switch and the dice roll. So there's lots of different ways that you can use switches to participate in recreation. All right. So our next category of things that we were going to kind of think about that you can use switches with is daily living, which can be very helpful. So the first switch that I'm going to use is this Dipsy switch, which when you first look at this, you kind of think, how in the world do I activate this switch? But this switch works it activates when it is moved at least a 30-degree tilt or angle. So I'll demonstrate it in a second, but I just wanted to show you kind of the different ways that you could use this. So it comes with kind of this soft headband that's got some Velcro. And let's see if I can, this side, it's a little hard with the glare there, I'm sorry, has some Velcro on it. So you can put it on there and then someone could wear that around their head. So then they could, with just a tilt of their head, activate the switch. And then it also comes with kind of the smaller version of the same idea. So this is one that you could put around your finger. And then it would just be the tilt of your finger to activate the switch. So let's see, how does that actually work in practice? So I have some switch adapted scissors here, which in real life are actually a little bit noisy, but we tried them out and I don't think it's going to come through Zoom, but if it gets a little loud, just wanted to give you fair warning here. But I'm going to plug my switch here into the scissors. There we go. So now I have it plugged into my scissors here with my switch. And if I tilt my switch, it activates. So all I have to do is move it that 30 degrees and it will activate. So if I were head on my head, I could, up or down, my finger could do it that way. But then that will activate the switch. Let me see if I can grab my paper here. Then if I put my paper in here and activate it, then I have, cut my paper. So that can be a way to use the scissors with a switch. All right, so I'm going to unplug that switch. And other option that I want to show you here, I'm going to get the scissors out of the way for a second, is called the honeybee. And this one is one that we actually have to turn on, the switch itself. And what this is an example of a proximity switch. So if you look here, it has 6, 3, 1, and T. And what the numbers are is that's how many inches away from this little red square that I have to be for it to activate. T is touch. So you could use this as just a regular kind of touch switch if you wanted to. But what you do is these arrows here kind of go through the options. So now it's on 3, 6, whoops. So, and then the calibration is they recommend that when it's in the position you want to use it, that you calibrate it. And then if you're kind of running into issues, sometimes it might help to calibrate again. But now, I don't know if the sound is going to come through, but I think it's on 3. So what that means, let's see if we can do this here. It activates, that's how close I have to be for it to activate. But if I move it up to 6, then I can be farther away. But if I put it on 1, then I have to be closer to the switch to activate it. So this could be useful if someone has a little movement, but might have a little hard time getting all the way to the switch, or if they want just to have the switch that they can move their head towards in a little bit. but I'm going to put this back on 3 just so that's a little more visually you can see. But I'm going to bring my scissors back here. Oops. And put it back in. And so let's see. Now if I get close, it activates. So that can be a way to use a proximity switch. All right, Paul, are there any questions so far?
Just a couple in the Q&A, but I've already addressed them, so nothing outstanding.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna stop my share here and go back to the PowerPoint real quick. All right. Oh, and then the other thing that example of a daily living, something that's comes available switch adapted is a switch adapted fan. So it has a switch port here on the side. So you could use any of those switches that we've used to activate the fan and turn it on. So that would be another option. All right, now Kayla's going to talk about interfaces and how those can help us use switches with something that might not come switch adapted.
All right. Yes. So interfaces. Interfaces allow a device like the iPad here to be controlled by a switch using, in this image here, you can see it's the Hook Plus interface, and it just plugs into the iPad, and then the switch plugs into the interface, and you can then use a switch to control the iPad. Some devices that are not switch ready usually require the adaptation, which is what the interfaces are for. So that's like specific types of toys, computers, tablets, and electrical appliances. Anything to add, Elizabeth?
I would just mention that, so the toys that I used to demonstrate were switch adapted. They had that switch port in the back. But if you can use an interface called a battery adapter on just a regular toy, and that would be your interface to use with the toy. So.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Should we get into looking at some of these switch interface combinations? Also, I apologize if you hear the dogs in the background. I am on dog duty. Do you want to move to the next slide, Elizabeth? Thank you. So I'm going to start by showing a recreation example. So I'm going to turn on my dot cam so you can see that. And what I'm going to show you is the Xbox adapted controller with a couple of switches connected to it so that it can control the Xbox. And the Xbox is right here behind me. So.
And Kayla, I might stop sharing the PowerPoint so they can see the TV a little bit better.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so that is the iPad. We won't look at the iPad right now. And you're going to look at this guy. Okay. So this is the Xbox adaptive controller. And if you look at the smaller, you might not be able to, might have to share screen for just a second. See it. So we got the Xbox adaptive controller here, and this in just its basic form is kind of a switch, but it connects to, I have it connected to the wobble stick here and a couple of jelly bean buttons. And so we're just going to kind of use, so I'll use this purple one here, and we're going to just, what I'm going to do is toggle through the menu here behind me. So we'll go home. So if you can kind of see the outline, I'm on the home page here, and we're going to, I'm going to use the D-pad here on this controller to move the menu screen. So if you can see that, now I'm on this panel here, right here. So I'm on the second one. It is a little washed out because of the lighting. But then when I press the purple switch, it's going to go back. And then this allows people to just kind of start a game. So this button here operates as the A. So like now we're in the settings menu. So this controller allows, this adapted controller allows you to use, to plug in a variety of different switches. There are some really cool options, not just the jelly beans and what have you, and you'll be able to fully play video games, control the Xbox, all that really cool stuff. Thank you, Elizabeth. And then the next one we're going to look at is tablet access.
Sheila, did you want to mention the sip and puff?
Yes, the sip and puff. I don't have it out because it's kind of takes up a lot of space. But the sip and puff is it allows you to control. Some people use it to control video games. There's some pretty cool YouTubers who use the switch and puff to use their breath to play Call of Duty, and they're very good at it. So it just kind of it attaches to their mounts, and then they use their breath and their lip movement to move their character and all that, and engage like the guns and things like that. So some really cool stuff there with the sip and puff. Okay, we are going to do tablet access now. And so I'm going to move this guy out of the way. The dice roller decided it wanted to play. Okay. Here we go. So here's the iPad. Let's see that. Okay. And then we have the Bluetooth switch. And so this is a switch on its own, and it'll plug right into, it's a Bluetooth. So you have to pair it, but it'll allow you to control your iPad. And to do that, we go into, there it is, accessibilities, and then you're going to go turn on switch control. And to turn it on, you toggle this. And we'll just cancel that because I want it on. So once it's turned on, you can set your switches. And so my orange is increase volume, and my white here is select item. And I have it set to auto scroll. So if you can see, oh, Elizabeth, do you want to, so I can, maybe we can, here.
Do you want, I can, let me,
I wonder,
I have, do you want me to narrate, or I can share my iPad?
yeah, that's fine. So I think it's just because the the dot cam is not the main view.
Okay.
But I selected it for spotlight. So I don't know if they can see, so I spotlighted it. So I don't know if it's visible or not now.
Oh, maybe if
otherwise I
I
can-
stopped sharing the PowerPoint, would that be better?
Yeah. Are you able to see that now, everyone? Awesome. Okay, great. Yeah. So I've spotlighted it. So as you can see, it's right now it's auto scrolling, and this blue outline is telling us this is the section, the area you're going to select. I do apologize for the dogs. So yes, so I don't know where the highlight went, but switch control, external switch. Okay. So we're back in and we want to turn it on. And then I'll turn it on. And there's toggling again. So let's see how it looks with the main menu. As it's scrolling here, I'm going to press the white button. Oh, I should probably turn it on, huh? Okay, there. Let's try that again. There we go. So as you can see, it's selecting this bottom area. And then we've got the camera. Now I'm on the camera. And as it's selecting, we'll take a picture. And so that's just using it as a switch. Now I've got a couple switches plugged in. I've got 2 plugged in so that it'll operate as an interface. And so let's do this guy. So I've got this one here, which is the Sensi ball switch. And well, if you plug it in, let's see. Okay. Make sure I got it plugged into the right option.
Yeah, while Kayla's getting those plugged in, there's for each of the yellow, the orange part of the switch and the white part of the switch each have a little switch port. So
Yes,
to
yes.
get the right one, to be the orange one, and the right one to be the
Yes.
white one.
Yeah, thank you for that. So now it's the Sensi ball is plugged in to act as the white, act as switch 1. So we'll let it auto scroll around back to the camera, and I just kind of put pressure on it and it'll take a picture. So that's how the Bluetooth switch operates as an interface to control your iPad.
All
Did I
right.
miss anything?
And then do you want to show them the micro light switch real quick?
Yes.
That's another option.
I absolutely can. So here is the micro light, and I'll show you kind of how this one doesn't take much pressure either. So we'll let it kind of go through. And I will, and then you just press it, just a light touch, and it'll take your picture or select your item.
And so you can use switches to really navigate a lot of the iPad. Specific apps that are not made by Apple will depend on if the developer has made their app switch accessible. So that's something to know, so that if you get started and you're trying to use an app and it just doesn't seem to be working, that might be the case. But kind of how to set up a switch and how to kind of navigate through this, there's a couple of resources on the second page of the supplemental handout. That'd be great. There's kind of Apple's how to set up switch control. And then AbleNet, which is a manufacturer of a lot of assistive technology. They also have what they call the missing user guide for switch control. And so that one is kind of Apple based, but you can also use switch control on Android tablets and other computers and things like that.
That's correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next interface switch combo we are going to show is the PowerLink with a couple different switches, the adjustable angle switch and the pillow switch, to turn on a light, which is pretty cool. So, Elizabeth, do you want to stop sharing so that I can? Okay. All right. So I've got. There we go. Okay. So this is the power link, and it's got two plugins here. If you can see the other side, trying to get in the camera there. So there's two kind of plugins for you to plug in your whatever appliance you're wanting to turn on. So you can turn. I mean, it could be a light, it could be a blender, it could be really whatever kind of kitchen appliance or appliance that plugs in. I think it's up to 50. Is it 15?
That sounds about right. There is kind of an amp maximum that they recommend, so you don't want to overload it.
Right.
But kind of what Kayla mentioned, like the lights and those kitchen appliances would be an option.
Okay, now it's all into view. So I'm going to turn it on, and the plug-in is back here. It's just a switch that you just toggle on, and we are plugged in to this side. And I believe so the first one I have the pillow switch plugged in. And I believe I have it set to latch. I believe. Okay. So you just press the button, and if you can see,
you're there. You go. Now you're in.
Yeah, I had to move it away because I didn't want to blind you guys. Because the last time when I tried this, it went right into the camera, and Elizabeth was like, "Ow, my eyes!" So I had it set away. So it's just a desk lamp, and so because it's set to latch, I have to tap it or press it lightly to turn it off, and that's that one. So that's off, and then we'll try it with the angle switch. So we are now plugged in to the angle switch, which has an adjustable angle that can be changed using these buttons here. So let's see. Oh, maybe I don't have it. Should probably take the right cord, huh? Oh, here we go. Here it is. And then we just, and there it is, turned on.
And the cool thing about, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, should I,
yeah.
Different mode.
The cool thing about the power link is it has different modes. So it's a little hard to see, but you can kind of see on the power link, there's some blue lights lighting up. But as Kayla changes the mode, it will change how the switch activates the light. So she was in latch, but I don't know what she's on now.
I think it's timed. So the bottom one, the very bottom option is timed. And so it's 1 minute. So it'll stay on for 1 minute, which is pretty cool. And then there's two switch, which is you need two switches, correct, Elizabeth?
Yes. That one you can use, you'd have to activate two switches for this, whatever's plugged in to activate. And then you can also just use it as direct, which is when you're pressing the switch, like for this example, the light would turn on. And then when you let go of the switch, the light would turn off.
Yes.
Which would not, in kind of terms of everyday use, might not be the best option for a light. Probably would use that latch option that Kayla started with.
Yes, correct.
But it's nice that it's versatile, and then it can kind of, you can
and
use it how it fits what you're
Right.
trying to do.
and it allows you to, to have some independence with certain things, just certain daily living things that maybe you wouldn't have as much independence with.
And Kayla, there was a question in the chat that maybe you can
Yes.
show about
Absolutely.
where the lamp is plugged into. Does it plug directly into the
Oh,
box?
yes.
Power link with the switch?
Yes. Yep. Here, let me show you really quick. Okay. So the lamp is plugged in right here. So this is the lamp's cord. And this, I believe, can extend just a little bit. And then this is the lamp's cord. You just plug it in like that.
Yeah.
That answers that question, correct?
Yep. So you plug it directly into the power link. And then you can plug something else in on the other side. And then the cord kind of coming out of the middle there is that the power link's power.
Yes. Yes. This is and it's kind of heavier, obviously, because they're household appliances. So it's gonna be a heavier cord, but it just plugs. I have this cord here, which powers the power link, plugged right into a surge protector, and it works great.
We have a question about how much pressure is required for that angle switch. And I know it's
yes.
not much, but I'm trying to find exactly how much.
I don't think I have like exact, but
My
so
memory, it's kind of the similar.
Yeah,
it's the same size if you're familiar with the big red switch, which is the bigger version of a jelly bean. But I don't think it's as much pressure as the jelly bean and the big red.
So it's click. It makes a clicking noise once you've activated it. So I don't know if you can hear. Maybe you can. I don't know. Put up my.
I just found it. 25 to 30 grams of force.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I'm very lightly touching it, and it's turning it on. So.
And Kayla, maybe you can kind of change the angle so they can see kind of.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Here we'll. Okay. So these allow you to, which way does it turn? Oh yeah, there. And then you push it down, and then you can kind of angle it this way. So there we go.
Yep. So it can, and then it will activate that way, and then it kind of goes all the way down to that black base is kind of the lowest.
Yeah.
It can go.
And I kind of, it was initially it was not very far off the base, the black base. And then, so now it's almost kind of all the way standing up now, as you can kind of see here. So there's a lot of variety on that one.
We have another question about the power links. Just asking if there are major differences between the newer versions and the older ones that have the dials for changing the settings. I don't know if we still have one of those, Elizabeth, but
I don't. I think we only have the newer versions. I don't know off the top of my head if there are. I would imagine they're similar because it's the same idea. It just that might, if you're be a question for AzelNet, but I would think that it would work in this similar way.
Yeah, my guess with the newer ones is they have 5 settings on that one. Is that right, Kayla? The one that you have? The dial might not have as many settings. So to offer the different ways to activate the switch.
Yeah, I think, there's five options.
Yeah, and Tracy just said the same thing in the chat, that she has access to the older ones, and they're very similar, just less options. All right, so I'm going to share the PowerPoint again for you here, Taylor.
No problem. All right. So those were our demos of the switch interface combinations. And this is by no means like the end all be all of options. There are so many ways to combine switches and switch interfaces. So many options that we can't show them all in one workshop. So this next section is going to be kind of around how to pick a switch, some questions to consider, just things to consider in general when deciding on what kind of switch will best suit the situation you're looking to address. And this is from the How to Pick a Switch by the Tash Incorporated. So one thing to consider is what actions can the person who will use the switch reliably perform? So what can they do? What can they do already with? And then which part of the body will give the person the best control over the switch activation? So that might be their hands, it might be their head, it might be their feet. How much force can the person consistently exert when hitting a switch, which is why there are different pressure limits and pressure requirements for switches, and why some switches don't take as much pressure as others. So those are, here are some more questions to consider. Does the person have good targeting ability? So kind of thinking about how much, like how big or how small can the switch be for them to consistently, reliably be able to engage the switch and control whatever they're trying to control. What is the person's range of motion? So this is helpful when kind of determining placement and what kinds of switches they can access. And like, will the person use a lot of force when hitting the switch? Is another question to consider, just in terms of how much will it require to turn it on and whatnot. Does the person have perceptual difficulties? And where will the person be using the switch? So will they be using it in combination with a wheelchair, or just at their desk, or even like in schools and things like that? Settings are also things to consider. Strategies for switch placement and positioning. You're going to want to keep the switch placement consistent, as that helps kind of get into a routine of using the switch and knowing where the switch will be all the time. Marking the ideal switch position with tape, marker, etc. Do not change a switch site without consulting the individual and others who work with them, so that they know where these, like, so they'll know if things are going to get changed. They should be made aware of that, so that they know what those new changes will be.
And also so that they have input in those changes.
Yes,
too.
that is correct. Yes. This next slide here is about our Simon Technology Center and kind of the things that we offer. So we offer general information on assistive technology, referrals. We have a lending library, and the lending library is pretty cool. It allows us we have items in the lending library that if you're like, hey, I wanna check these out, you can check them out and test them out before you make a purchase. There's free consultations with the assistive technologists that are at the Simon Technology Center, and they're free. And if you have specific questions around things, you reach out to us, and we kind of put together resources and tools that we think will benefit the situation, and individualized training. So if there's like a specific tool that you're like, I really, really want to know all I can know about this, we also help with that. And so, yeah, now we got some questions. For more information, contact the Pacer Technology Center, and our number and email and our website are all provided there for you to check out. And we thank you for joining us for this workshop.
We have no questions here yet. I answered a question in the chat, but I might just throw it out to you guys. Amy asked, where should I turn if the SLP isn't familiar with switches? Any suggestions? And I just said, send them to us. Check out workshops like this one. What do you guys have any suggestions?
I would also suggest maybe if you're also working with an occupational therapist, occupational therapists kind of are, if you have questions about switches and placement, they do kind of some more of maybe some more assessment based kind of figuring out switches. So they, I think, would be a good resource too. Yeah. But yes, you can definitely come our way. We were happy to show you, and everything that we demonstrated today is part of our library that Kayla mentioned about too. So
those are all things that you would be able to check out.
All right, and I just put the link to the evaluation in the chat, so you guys can click on that, fill it out, and the certificate of attendance will be at the end of that.
Yes. So once you submit the evaluation, a link will come up, a new page, and there'll be some blue text. And if you click that blue text, it will link you to the certificate. And we just ask that you either print that or download it to your computer so that you have it. Because once you navigate away from that page, you won't be able to access it again.
Yeah.
So we just want to make sure that if you're looking for the certificate, you are able to access it.
Yeah.
And thank you all so much for joining us. We're glad you came.
Thank you so much for joining us.
If you have any other questions after today, please feel free to reach out to us.
All right, looks like it's all quiet in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.
All right.
So